Andrew Dominik's Marilyn Monroe biopic Blonde has become one of the most intensely debated films of the year. It's been championed as a masterpiece, it's been panned as an embarrassment. The film's explicit content, extreme stylization, and the generous amount of artistic liberty it takes in portraying Monroe's life have all inspired enormous controversy, dividing critics and audience members alike. My own opinion was mixed. There were things I greatly admired about the film, and things I found repellent and excessive. But this video is not really a review. As I've been following the controversy, one thought has been repeatedly occurring to me. I can't remember the last mainstream movie that managed to create so big and so impassioned a debate. Within the disgust being expressed towards the film, we're seeing a widespread re-examination of Monroe's legacy. Dominik's work is being written off by many as an empty provocation, but I want to offer another view. The reason Blonde forces us to think so much about this woman and her image is that it dares to give us an experience we dislike. I don't expect to change anyone's opinion with this video, but at the very least, I hope to give a little more understanding of the film and its intentions. Sometimes, movies aren't made to be enjoyed. Difficult as that is to appreciate, it's part of what facilitates cultural discussion. We don't often acknowledge it, but there can be value in seeing a movie you hate. Produced by Netflix, adapted from the novel by Joyce Carol Oates, Blonde is a heavily fictionalized account of the life and career of Hollywood icon Marilyn Monroe. Told in an impressionistic, hallucinatory style, the film puts a morbid and acute emphasis on Monroe's many, many traumas, both real and imagined. We see her first in childhood, suffering at the hands of her mentally ill mother. We follow her into adulthood, where she is abused in various ways by a succession of powerful men. She rises to stardom, struggles to be taken seriously as an actress, and becomes an object of desire and derision to an almost exclusively male public. Following 2 failed marriages, betrayals and assaults by former lovers, multiple abortions and miscarriages, and a fruitless, lifelong search for her father, Monroe's mind, like her mother's, begins to unravel. She spends her final days lost in a drifting, perpetual haze of alcohol, narcotics, and delirium before she finally, almost mercifully, dies in 1962 at the age of 36. Dominik's approach is vividly stylized. He conveys period setting and mental state through shifting aspect ratios and abrupt fluctuations between black and white and color. The camera work and editing are a borderline experimental mixture of formal presentation and expressive subjectivity. The imagery, often distorted or extended through special effects, and explicit enough to earn the film a rare NC-17 rating, visualizes Monroe's world as a beautiful and violent nightmare. The film puts us so close to her emotional distress that for most of the runtime, we end up sharing in it. Many scenes are shot and paced in such a way as to make us feel trapped alongside her, enduring endless, excruciating moments of suffering and vulnerability. For even the sturdiest of viewers, the film is likely to leave you feeling battered and exhausted. Reaction to the movie, across the board, has been furiously polarized. As of this video, Blonde's rating on IMDb stands at a 5.5. On Rotten Tomatoes, 42%. On Metacritic, an even 50. Viewers appear to be divided into ardent and equal opposition. There has been praise for Dominik's incredible visuals and the extraordinary lead performance by Ana de Armas, and widespread criticism of the film's content, which many critics have called exploitative. Activists have attacked Dominik's treatment of abortion. Some Netflix users, according to Variety, went so far as to disparage the film as sexist and cruel. I agree with many of these criticisms. Blonde is relentless, brutal, and frequently excessive. It's been made with such single-minded fixation on Monroe's mental and physical pain that her humanity gets reduced to nothing more than perennial victimhood. We feel sympathy for her, but only as an emblem of suffering. Several scenes which may have benefited from a little restraint are pushed so far that Dominik begins to cross a line into outrageously bad taste. The miscalculated and poorly timed abortion scenes, which, as historians have pointed out, did not likely happen in real life, are the worst example. Dominik's use of some, shall we say, invasive camera angles makes it feel as if the director is violating Monroe just as much as her abusers. Very little of the film's 2-hour and 45-minute runtime is spent on the actual making of Monroe's classic films. We get little sense of her contribution to these movies, no real insight into how she was able, in spite of trauma and insecurity, to deliver the radiant, joyous performances that made her one of Hollywood's greatest stars. Dominik isn't interested in her work. He shows the actress as having no meaningful control over her famous screen persona, and all but vilifies her Hollywood image as a studio-manufactured monstrosity. Much of her talent gets diminished nearly to the point of non-existence. Her best performances are seen as nothing more than the repulsive fantasies of men, used to further victimize a helpless woman. Andrew Dominik is an artist often drawn to stories deconstructing the false images of fame. His first film, Chopper, was based on the life of notorious Australian criminal Mark Brandon Chopper Reed. Inspired by Reed's best-selling non-fiction books, Dominik's acclaimed debut, starring Eric Bana in his breakthrough role, cut through Reed's self-mythologizing to portray him as a paranoid and volatile enigma, his tendency for pointless violence the result of an overactive imagination and delusional mindset. In his second film, the sprawling and meditative epic western, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, Dominik again used real events to offer a comment on celebrity, starring Brad Pitt as the infamous outlaw and Casey Affleck as his eventual killer. The story imagines their complex relationship as that of an obsessed fan growing disillusioned with his idol. James is shown as unpredictably violent, prone to mood swings and brooding depression, a far cry from the romanticized and naive image Ford has invented in his head. Blinded by confusion, resentment, and anger, he kills his hero and is publicly labeled a coward. For the rest of his short life, Ford is tortured by guilt and his own distorted celebrity image. These thematic obsessions took on a more postmodern and confrontational aspect in Dominik's third film, the cold and alienating Killing Them Softly. Here, the director deconstructs the false images of genre itself. He takes the traditional elements of the crime film, shootouts, fistfights, robberies, drains them of their entertainment value, and uses them as a method of punishing the audience. It's a blunt, darkly funny, at times nauseating statement that the violence we see in movies has little to do with the ugly, vicious reality. Blonde, which spent a decade in the making, combines these two layers of commentary into one. The story illustrates the void between Monroe's public image and her private torment. The style rejects the idea that her misery should serve as the basis for entertainment. Dominik's work has always questioned the escapist philosophies and commercial attitudes of modern movie making. With this film, he seems determined to destroy them completely. Blonde is not a biopic, not in the traditional sense. It should not be looked at as a factual representation of Monroe's life. It should be seen for what it is, a demand that we totally rethink our perceptions of this woman. She's talked about as a tragic figure, but her likeness continues to be marketed as an embodiment of Hollywood style and glamour. When we look at her, how many of us see a person and not an image? It may be that none of us do. Throughout Blonde, Monroe is crying out to be seen. Once in a while, a character will spot a tiny sliver of her true self. They learn to look partway through the fantasy, but never all the way to the other side. The woman they see in movies and publicity is simply more visible than the real thing. Monroe is lost under the weight of her image. Dominik wants the audience to feel frustrated by this. When she is punished for being marketed as a sex symbol by studio executives, he wants us to feel angry. When her ravenous public makes it impossible for her to escape that status, he wants us to feel horrified. In the film's best moments, he succeeds in showing us how awful it might have been to be as famous, as adored, and as invisible as Monroe. It's impossible to ignore the fact that he is unavoidably yet another man creating yet another image of her, which he uses and arguably does exploit for his own purposes. But we're not meant to take his interpretation as the truth. It's only an incentive for us to question what we think we know about someone we've only ever seen through the mammoth filter of Hollywood myth. Blonde is meant to upset us. It is extreme, it is provocative, and even reckless. It has earned every bit of its controversy. It's also served as a catalyst for what could end up being a valuable public discussion. We seem to be thinking more deeply about Monroe's films, about her place in cinema history. Many reviews have been passionate attempts to define what she has meant to each viewer in an individual way. There's been renewed discourse of the male gaze and Hollywood's long history of abusing women on screen and off. People appear to be searching for some way to ease Monroe's pain, perhaps an indication that the film's message is getting through. It takes a lot of nerve to make something people are supposed to hate, and it takes a lot of work on our end to figure out if such a film has succeeded or failed. The difference, I think, is that a bad film can be ignored. A good film, even one we dislike, cannot. The reason we've been discussing Blonde so much is because it has an impact. And there are times when difficult and important ideas find their best articulation in negativity.